All right, before we jump into this show, I want to say a little word about one of my favorite products that I use. It is my NED CBD. By now, you heard from me or someone mentioned that hemp or CBD is very much so beneficial in their lives. Particularly for me, I know that it's been very helpful for my sleep, and I've been pretty outspoken about it. NED is a product that I really love. They provide a full spectrum CBD. It's extracted from organically grown hemp plants sourced right here in the US. And the reason why I love them is because of their transparency. Right before we started working with them, I went on their website. I looked at all of their third-party testing, which they do make available to us. And they have testing for all of the ingredients in their products, which is really going above and beyond. And I love them because they have zero synthetic ingredients, super transparent, third-party testing. You see everything for yourself, as I mentioned. But NED is very special because it's a full spectrum CBD. That means it contains all of the cannabinoids, not just CBD, where you're going to see isolates all over the market. But cannabinoids are going to be very important because they're going to provide the full wide range of benefits in our body, right? And it's going to be treating things like inflammation, anxiety, to other more serious conditions that we see data on epilepsy and neurodegenerative diseases. So my experience with NED has been great. It's been super helpful for my sleep. I see it on my Oura Ring every morning. I'm having more deep, restful, rejuvenating sleep. But again, it's not just for that. It has a whole spectrum because it is wide range. It's not just sleep. It's for other disruptions in the body too. So I highly would recommend NED. And check this out. As a give back to the Heal Thyself listener, you're going to receive 15% off of your first purchase. You're going to get 20% off of your first membership purchase. Go to helloned.com/Dr. G. You're going to enter the code DRG at checkout. That's HELLONED.com/DRG. You're going to get 15% off of your first one-time order or 20% off of your first subscription order plus free shipping. Before we jump in, I want to talk a little bit about Biooptimizers. This is the magnesium that I've been using. The magnesium is called Magnesium Breakthrough. Magnesium is so important to human health that I dedicated a full show just to talk about what magnesium is, where it's found, what it does to the body, and if we're low on magnesium, how we suffer from it. So Magnesium Breakthrough by Biooptimizers is one of my favorite magnesiums out there, if not my favorite. It's the one I've been using consistently for the past probably around 3 months now. But it's super unique because it is one of the only magnesiums out there that contain all 7 unique form of magnesiums. Other supplements you see right now, go on the internet and see, you're going to see synthetic isolates of magnesium that are not going to be helpful for magnesium deficiency. And it's not going to help you sleep better. As I mentioned on the magnesium show that I did, 75% of the people out there are not getting enough sleep because they're not getting enough magnesium. Majority of us are magnesium deficient. I've seen it in practice. I've seen it in people with their complaints. The lack of magnesium is going to make it more difficult to sleep well, to have a better relaxed nervous system. If you're part of that 75% who's not getting a good night's rest, which I absolutely was actually, I want you to give Magnesium Breakthrough a shot. All you need to do is go to www.magbreakthrough.com/DRG. You're going to save 10% off of your order. That's MAG breakthrough.com/DRG. And you're going to use the special code right here, DRG10, and you're going to receive this amazing offer. All right, everyone, welcome to Heal Thyself. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. Check this out. What a good show we have today. We all sleep on beds. We all spend time on beds. So much of our life, actually. And not many of us think about the quality of the bed. So we're going to go into what is it in beds that could be making us sick long term. Now, you might think it's crazy because we don't think about our beds too much, but there's actually tangible evidence out there that is leading us to believe that beds can be a problem for the lifetime of the bed and your exposure to it. Also, on the product review, I'm going to go over my favorite bed companies. So if you are looking to invest in a bed, hopefully this will give you some direction. And so excited that I have someone from my alma mater, University of Bridgeport, College of Naturopathic Medicine. Dr. Erin Kinney is out here from Maryland, and she is the expert on stress. Now, we're not just going to talk about, oh, stress kills you. We're going to go deep into what's happening in your body when you're acutely stressed, chronically stressed, what's happening to your cells, and how it's translating to diseases over time. But also, she's going to empower us and tell us what tests to take, and also what are the tactics that we need to do to implement better health overall. So it's going to be so, so exciting. I can't wait. Let's jump into this knowledge bomb. All right. Hello. This is the bed show. Now, you might recall I did this about a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, but this is the updated version of the bed show. But really quick, before I go into listing the beds, all right, I want you all to understand why a conventional bed may be a problem. And I can almost guarantee no doctor has ever sat with you in the office going, how long have you had your bed? What's the brand of your bed? What's the airflow in your house like? And trying to connect it to disease, because we don't think like that. But I want to teach you a few things. So we spend about a third of our life sleeping, a third, inhaling, exhaling in the bed, right? 6, 7, 8, sometimes 9 hours. But we're breathing in the air of our room. This is why the air quality in our room is the most important air quality in the home, right? And I talk about air quality. I did a whole show on air quality and how to optimize it. But when you're breathing in the air from your room, one of the biggest things that's influencing the air quality is the chemicals that are in your bed, but also mold, things like what's in the rugs, things like what's in the furniture. But the bed is major. It's massive, right? For me, in my opinion, through the research I've done over time, the bed is the single biggest factor to air quality exposure in our home. And we lay on it so much of our life. And when we sleep, this is the time when our body's detoxing, healing, integrating, recuperating, rejuvenating, right? We don't want to burden the body, but we do. The surface exposure that we have are volatile organic compounds. These are off-gassing for the life of the bed. Now, granted, in the first few years, it is most pronounced. But VOCs, volatile organic compounds, are sort of like a slow drip into a cup that when it overflows, we start seeing symptoms. But this is why I talk about these so much, right? It's a long game. I'm a long game type of guy, right? A slow drip type of person. So what happens is over time, that cup's going to overflow. Now, the cup in itself is dependent on a few things: genetics, our whole constitution, stress levels, right? But what we see when that cup overflows are things like chronic diseases, diabetes, hypertension, cancer, dementias. They don't happen overnight. It's when that drip drop is influencing every single day our health. And at some point, it's going to overflow if we don't empty it. So you're either slowly filling that cup or emptying it on the daily. And home is a major, major dropper into that cup. And beds are a major influence for home air. So what's the problem with conventional beds? The same problem there is with conventional food. The same problem there is with conventional personal care products. The problem is no one's looking out for you. We know this, and I spoke this many times over and over. There are loopholes within the FDA that allows for chemicals into our system, and they're egregious, right? And beds are not excluded. Many of us never even think about bed quality. How many of us never even thought about maybe, just maybe, the bed our child is laying on is the root cause of his or her eczema, hormonal dysfunction, cognitive behavioral issues, right? How many of us as adults think about when we have a cancer diagnosis or chronic disease diagnosis, we never even think about maybe it's our beds throughout our life that is a major contributor to this disease. What we know is that the very chemicals that are in your bed are known to cause dysfunction in the body. It's not a theory. It's a direct connection to the harmful agents and how it affects the body over time. So what's present? Well, we have flame retardants. These are polybrominated diphenyl ethers, also known as PBDEs, right? They're banned since 2004, but they're persistent. And unless you were born past 2004, you're most likely having these chemicals in the body and they're still breaking down slowly over time. Why? Because they build up over time. But the dose makes the poison, right? That's not a true statement. Things build up in the body over time, particularly the ones that are fat soluble and bioaccumulate, right? Even though we get them in small amounts, they build up in the body over time. So even though they're also banned, it's likely that they're still in the materials in your home. And the reason they were banned is because we saw that there was a doubling of these chemicals in women's breast milk every 5 years. These affect thyroid and are linked to cognitive and behavioral issues in children, as well as reproductive issues. It's wild to me that we're not even doing research on this or paying more attention. But like all patterns in environmental medicine and chemicals, they did just what BPA did, right? BPA they knew was toxic. They took it out and they said it's BPA free, but replaced it with an analog that is just as toxic as BPA. The same with flame retardants. There's new flame retardants out there. And guess what? It's going to be innocent until proven guilty. And guess what? We're the guinea pigs. Now, remember, this isn't to put out fear. This is to put out information that is real. It is factual, and it is for us to be empowered to go, okay, now I know that the FDA ain't protecting me. There's loopholes, and chemicals are innocent until proven guilty. So let me maybe not trust what's in the store and go, let me trust brands that are doing better by me. And this is the reason why I'm putting out this information. What else is in bedding that it could be an issue? Glues and adhesives, stuffing, especially the memory foam, right? Memory foams may be the worst of the worst. Actually, in my opinion, memory foam is the worst. The polyurethane and or the memory foams are pretty much present in all mattresses. And the thing with polyurethane is that it off-gasses something called propylene oxide and TDI, which stands for toluene diisocyanate. Now, there's sufficient evidence to show that both are carcinogenic to animals, meaning they cause cancer, with an undetermined carcinogenicity to humans. But the CDC recommends that we limit our exposure to these chemicals due to its potential cancer-causing effect in humans, right? But what else does this polyurethane and memory foams, which are on most beds, have? Benzene. You heard me talk about this when we talked about hand sanitizers, and it's a volatile organic chemical that's found in the polyurethane, and it affects our immune system. So if someone has a chronically low immune system, how many of us are talking about beds? Dimethylformamide. This is a volatile organic compound of concern, especially when you're exposed to it over the life of the bed. Polyols, connected to headaches, dizziness, nausea, especially acutely, right? You get the idea. Polyurethane memory foams are a big problem, and a lot of these conventional beds have them. And like many of these FDA loopholes companies are benefiting from, you may ask, how the heck do they get away with this? Well, mattress companies do not need to disclose what is in their product. And some of the chemicals you may smell. Let me tell you a little story. When a few years ago, I think it was back in 2015, I was sleeping in this bed and it was pretty uncomfortable. So I decided to get a mattress topper from, it wasn't Target, it was Kohl's actually. It was from Kohl's. And I remember it was in a box and I brought it to the room and I took it out of the box and it was vacuum sealed. So I unrolled it and then cut open the vacuum seal. And I'll tell you right now, I'll never forget that smell. It was the most chemical, synthetic smell. It not only took over my nostrils, it took over my whole room. And I remember the person that I was with at the time, she was complaining about a headache, right? Immediately she had a headache. Me, I started feeling kind of buzzed, a little bit dizzy. And if we didn't smell that, we wouldn't have known, right? Because not all volatile organic compounds have a scent, but these had true chemically new car smell scents, right? And I knew for a fact immediately that it was the mattress topper that was giving us these immediate symptoms. So what do? I said, forget this. We rolled it up as best as possible. Try to roll up a mattress topper that is unrolled and plumping up, right? Because it's vacuum sealed. It was almost impossible to put back in the box, but nonetheless, we did, and we brought it back. But the whole point I'm trying to say is that a lot of these companies have these beds or mattress toppers or a lot of these things in vacuum seals, or they're rolled up. And what we should have done, even if I decided to keep it and I go, forget it, I don't care about conventional mattresses. I don't care about toxins. Even if we did, the better idea would have been to open it outside, let it off gas for a few hours, maybe even the day, and then bring it in. But listeners and viewers, you guys are way more empowered than this and you make better decisions. So that's my little story. I really wanted to jump in into the mattress brands that we really should watch for. And if we're looking to make an investment and get a new mattress, I want to give you the brands to get. So let's get to this product review. All right, mattresses in this product review. As I was talking a little bit about in the Knowledge Bomb segment, glues and adhesives are a big part of what makes these beds toxic. A lot of the natural alternative ones are sewn together, which is much, much better. But you'll know that a lot of these glues and adhesives are the reason why furniture can be toxic too, because of the volatile organic compounds that are being released. Also, a lot of these alternative beds or non-toxic beds utilize wool and cotton. By utilizing that, they're able to not use flame-resistant chemicals because they're inherently flame-resistant. So many of these beds you'll see contain wool or cotton. Now, the next question would be, what is the quality of it? So when it comes to these beds, not all are perfect, but all are significantly better and healthier Then the conventional beds like Sealy's, Sleepy's, any memory foam based ones. All right. So regardless of the beds that I mentioned here, and I might not mention a bed that you're looking for, before I do, I want to just teach you what certifications really are important when you buy a bed, and then you can look for it yourself. So the first one is going to be Global Organic Textile Standard. This is the GOT certification. There's a really cool website called Mattress Nerd out there. So he or she looks really into all of these things. But according to the GOT certification, this is from the website. It's the world's leading processing standard for textiles made from organic fibers. And basically what it's doing is telling us that it's considered safe according to several environmental and social factors. And in order to qualify for this, the company's textile needs to have at least 70% organic fibers and 30% non-organic fibers and meet stringent environmental and toxicological standards for the certification of GOTS. The counterpart for GOTS is GOLS, and that's for latex. So you really want, a lot of these beds are either cotton-based, latex-based, wool-based, or all. And what you want is those certifications. The other certification is OEKO Tech Standard 100. This is a slightly more comprehensive certification than GOTS. And any of these items with the certification have been inspected by an independent partner for this. And every component is free from harmful substances. So this is a really important one when you're looking for chemicals that haven't been regulated by government bodies. And another very important one is the Green Guard Gold certification. This helps us identify which products have low emissions and are going to improve the air quality in your home. So this is a lot for the VOCs, volatile organic compounds, that you'd be exposed to that are really the major problem with beds. And with this gold certification, it's super stringent because it's offering protection for vulnerable populations like the elderly, children, those with allergies, those with sensitivity. So if any of you fall into that, then a Green Guard Gold certification is very important for your bed. And it's going to ensure that there's very low amounts to no amounts of VOCs. Other important certifications to look for: organic wool certification, sustainable wool, some of the environmental and worker protection certifications like Eco Institute certified, Fair Trade certified, Rainforest Alliance, Climate Neutral certified, FSC certified. If you find one with all of those, great. A lot of the ones I'm going to talk to have most of these. I haven't found one that has all of them, but the ones that I mention as the best have the really important standards like GOTS, GOLS, OEKO, TEX, Green Guard certified. So back to the beds. I usually start with the ones that are meh, or maybe we should stay away from, but today I'm feeling good. I want to start with the best of the best. So I'm going to start with the one I have, the Birch Living mattress. And that one across the board has really, really, really good certifications. I know I'm sleeping in a bed that doesn't have off-gassing. It's mostly wool and cotton, super comfortable. And I have the mattress topper on it to protect the bed. I have the sheets. I have the whole nine with it. And you'll see me put out some videos later about this, but this is the one that I have. Other really good companies on that level: Avocado Mattress, really popular one out there, top quality one. Brentwood Home, which was my former mattress, another top quality one, and Plush Beds. Those are really good mattress companies that have really good certifications that I know if I had any of those beds and I was laying on them, I know that I'm not being exposed to volatile organic compounds. I know that I'm not being exposed to these flame retardants. I'm not being exposed to things that are affecting my hormones, my nervous system, my immune system, and it's going to be comfortable and it's going to be sustainable. So this is why I'm such a fan of all of these bed companies. They're doing right by us. Here are other companies that are good, I would say second tier, as opposed to the ones that I just mentioned: Tuft & Needle, Awara, Sattva, EcoTerra, Wink Beds, Purple, Dream Cloud. These are the ones that my assistant and I, we went over. We were checking off which certifications are which, but really, even if I didn't mention a bed that you're looking for, now you know what certifications to look for. So I was really happy and excited to bring you all this because I really, really, truly believe that a bed is one of the number one interventions you can make to improve your air quality at home and your overall health. Again, we don't just lay on a bed for a night and go, whoa, I'm so sick. This bed is toxic. We don't even feel it. But what we do know is that these chemicals over time start filling up that cup. And then at some point, you forget what it was like to feel great like you were 2 years ago. We adapt to it. And the problem is that toxic beds are really lending to disrupting our health. So I really hope that helped you. And check this out. Keep an eye out. I'm going to do an ebook on all of this in a few months. So I'll put a nice chart for you all so you can see what I saw when I put this together. And I'll do a little bit more research and include some more beds. So really hope that helped. Can't wait to get to our awesome guest. Dr. Erin Kinney is a stress expert, man. She's not going to sit here and tell you just stress makes you sick, but she's going to tell us why and how and what happens in the body, but also tell us about solutions, how to improve our health and improve our life. I cannot wait to get her on. So let's get to this special guest segment. All right, today's special guest actually comes from my alma mater as well. Dr. Erin Kinney is the expert on stress, and we are going to talk everything about stress. Now, you know, I mentioned that stress is a pillar for health, and you got to get it under control, but we got to know about it first. So, Dr. Erin Kinney, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see you. I haven't seen you it's been a while, probably since we were back in University of Bridgeport, back on the East Coast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, okay, well, let's see. What's that, 8 years ago, maybe around there?
8, maybe 10, more? Maybe a while ago.
I was on a call with my classmates and I'm like, God, it's crazy to know that we graduated like 2 years ago. They're like, Christian, it's like 4.5, 5 years.
It's been a while.
I was like, what? Because time flies, doesn't it? Time
flies, yeah. I know. I have had 2 kids, gotten married, gotten divorced. I've done all the things since graduating, built a big practice. And I personally have dealt with a lot of stress. So, of course, you know, what we go through ourselves, we tend to end up helping our patients with. And so, I ended up kind of treating a lot of adrenal fatigue, which I'm sure you guys have touched on your show. And then I've dug really deep into the science of what exactly happens with cortisol and why is cortisol such an important hormone? Because I think we often think of cortisol as being the stress hormone. It's bad, but it plays a lot of really important roles. One, it governs our circadian rhythm. So the thing that wakes you up in the morning is cortisol. The thing that's supposed to help you fall asleep is when your cortisol levels fall and melatonin levels rise. But so when people, and we chatted about this just before we jumped on, sometimes people have a really hard time waking up in the morning, but then they feel totally awake, you know, at 10 or 30 or 11, and they're like, I can't sleep. They typically have an irregular pattern in their circadian rhythm, which is one of the first signs of some adrenal dysfunction. And as you said, that stress is really important. It's important to get it under control, but I am really passionate about teaching who I work with, my patients, who I talk to, why is it so important? Like what happens at a cellular level? And so the other important thing to note about cortisol is one of its main jobs is that it actually downregulates the production of inflammatory cytokines. So I was explaining to I'm here visiting my sister, I was explaining to her in the car that I like to think about cortisol as you would think about blood glucose. So we all know that we need glucose to survive. And we need it inside the cells. If blood glucose is going crazy at high levels circulating in our bloodstream, that's when it starts to cause a problem. So, and we need insulin in order to get the glucose inside of the cell, right? So we need to have an insulin receptor, the insulin binds, then the glucose can get into the cell, and then everything's great. Cortisol is very similar. Cortisol it's in your bloodstream when we get stressed. It needs to then bind to a receptor called a glucocorticoid receptor. And once it binds to that receptor, it can get into the nucleus, and then it downregulates the production of something called IL-6, NF-kappa beta, all of these inflammatory cytokines that, if they're left unchecked, can lead to the development of chronic disease and inflammation. And so, you know, if you've got heart disease, if you've got atherosclerosis, if you've got any chronic thing, it's typically linked back to stress. And this is why. Because if cortisol levels are going crazy and they're really high in the bloodstream, just like if glucose is really high in the bloodstream and you don't do anything about it, the body downregulates the production of the receptor. So there's this concept of what we call glucocorticoid resistance. And they did a lot of, there's not a lot of research on adrenal fatigue. If you go and you look in PubMed about adrenal fatigue, you're not going to find anything. But if you go and you look at something called glucocorticoid resistance, there's a lot of studies on people who've been given high doses of steroids for prolonged periods of time, which is basically putting your system into artificial stress. So there's all this research on, yeah, if you take prednisone for 2 to 3 months, you're going to eventually not be able to accept cortisol into the cells, and you get all these inflammatory, crazy issues. And so that's exactly what happens when you're under chronic stress. It's just like you've been taking steroids for a while, because prednisone, if you're not aware, is synthetic cortisol. So when we need prednisone or we need steroids, it typically can mean one of two things. You either are not making enough cortisol, or you're having trouble getting your cortisols into your cells. So this is a lot of information that I just spoke very quickly, but does that make sense?
100%. You came kicking down the door with the guns blazing. That's amazing.
I love talking about this stuff.
You love it so much. You were talking in the car to your sister about cortisol. I love that.
I'll talk to you about it to anybody who wants to listen.
I love that. So, but no, this is such important work, because it is a massive, massive, massive pillar of health.
Yes.
We are so overstressed.
We're so overstressed.
Physically, chemically, mentally, emotionally. We just go and go and go, especially in this culture.
Oh, there's no, we don't believe in rest. We believe that it's like our values are go, 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 do, which puts our system in fight, flight all the time.
So let's talk about the average standard American person who's been told, we gotta go, go, go. Wake up in the morning. As soon as I wake up, ain't no time for me. I got to get dressed, drink my coffee, go to work, grind at work, come home, finally relax, but then go to sleep, and then go do the same thing until the weekend.
Yeah.
What does that picture of health look like? Cellular cortisol.
Well, so typically if you're doing that, so I like to think about cortisol as it's basically your body, as I get it regulates your circadian rhythm, but it's also what gives you energy. So I think in Chinese medicine, they call it qi, or in other cultures they call it like your life force. I think cortisol is the scientific equivalent to your chi or your life force. It's your energy. But I like to use this analogy. Let's pretend that cortisol is the money that your body has to spend, right? And when you sleep or when you rest or you do anything that puts you in parasympathetic mode, which is the rest and digest mode, that's when you earn cortisol. When you get up in the morning and you get up and you drink coffee and you go, 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 you're spending your cortisol. Anything you do that's not resting is essentially spending cortisol. So let's say that on average you sleep for 8 hours a night and that earns you $100 worth of cortisol. And that's what you need to spend throughout the day. If that's how your life is, great. You should be okay. But let's say maybe you go through a period, maybe 3 weeks or so, where you're not sleeping well and you only get 4 hours of sleep. Well, you get up and you maybe drink an extra cup of coffee. Coffee or caffeine or any stimulant that we use is like taking out a line of credit. And it says, oh, hey, you only have $50, but we'll still let you spend the $100. But what happens is you end up going into debt. And if you keep doing that cumulatively, just like you said, if you're kind of in the rat race of life and you're not relaxing, you're going to end up with a large amount of debt. And so, people come to me all the time and they're telling me what's going on with them physically. I'm like, well, you've got adrenal fatigue. And they ask me like, what supplements to take? What can I do? And obviously those things help. But at the end of the day, you have to pay back the debt. You have to pay back the rest debt. So that building in a relaxation practice is one of the biggest things that you can do. And that can look different for people, right? Meditation, it could be, I'd sometimes tell people just to put on headphones, play your favorite music, and lay down for 10 minutes just to practice the act of relaxing, because it's not something that we do. I am obsessed with the movie Eat, Pray, Love. I don't know if you've ever seen it with Julia Roberts. Yes. Yeah. And there's this scene where she's in Italy and she's talking to some dude named Luca Spaghetti, and he's like, you Americans, you just go, 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 go. You do not know how to do nothing. He's like, in Italy, we have this, it's called dolce far niente. Like, it's the art of doing nothing. Oh, yeah. And I always think about that. We really don't know how to do nothing. I myself, some days I'm like, okay, I got nothing to do. Like, I'm going to stir up some drama. Because it feels weird to relax, but it's so needed.
Yeah.
So I think you have to actually practice it in order for it to become part of your everyday thing.
It's interesting when you said that quote. I thought about a quote from a long time ago. It was, I don't know who said it, but they were like, the biggest struggle of man is that he can't stay in his quarters for 10 minutes without distraction. Yeah. And I'm like, they were saying this thousands of years ago, you mean to tell me?
Yeah.
And it's true. It is the bane of our existence that we just can't be in solitude or just quiet and relax.
It's hard. It's hard for us.
It's really hard. And we have the cell phone to distract us, right? And if we don't have the cell phone, we put on the TV. And if we don't have the TV, then we go out with friends.
Well, that was what you meant. Where you're talking about someone who's in that daily rat race and just like they go home and they go to bed. No, most people go home and they watch TV in their bed. And if you're watching, a show that's, scary or has some sort of, that can also be activating your fight flight at 10 o'clock at night, which is not great to go to sleep. I'm a big fan of not having TVs in the bedroom. I think it's a 100%. Really bad practice. Me too. I think it's, if you have a partner, it's not great for the relationship. If it's just not good to go to bed watching. It's also not good to go to bed staring at a phone screen, which I'm guilty of and I'm working on. But I think we've got too much screen time. And the thing on a physiological level, when you're staring at a screen, it's stopping your pineal gland from producing melatonin.
Yeah.
And melatonin and cortisol have these direct opposing actions. So, as I said, cortisol, typically it's elevated in the morning and it goes down throughout the day. And that's, the circadian rhythm pattern. Melatonin is typically very low in the morning and it rises at night. But if you're watching TV or you're staring at a screen or you stare at a computer all day long, your melatonin levels are probably going to stay low, which when melatonin is low, the body kind of thinks, oh, melatonin's low, I should probably make more cortisol, which at night is not great.
Mm-hmm.
So I love to recommend, even if you don't need it to fall asleep, a baby dose of melatonin if you're on screens a lot.
Right.
So if your job is sitting at a computer and, I've for most of COVID, I was staring at a screen all day long. So I would always take a baby dose of melatonin just to get those levels circulating at that time period to help lower the cortisol.
Yeah. How many of us are staring at screens, not even just at night, all day?
All day.
I actually found for me, when I put on blue blockers, I'm so much more tired so much earlier.
Yes.
Without them, all right, at 11 o'clock, I'm starting to feel tired.
Yeah.
With them, I'm like, if I put them right when sunset, 9 o'clock, I'm like, damn, I got to go to sleep.
But that's normal. That's when you should be kind of falling asleep.
But most of us are just totally, and it's funny that you talk about the cortisol rise. I one time had this patient, and she would go crazy at 11 o'clock. Like, she'd be exhausted, and then like this gust of wind would kick over her. I go, let's see how you look. We saw the pattern, and how many of us are struggling with that? Like, we have all this energy at night, and then we're exhausted
the next morning. Well, it's almost like you're jet lagged, right? Like that's, when you go, I just flew in, I've been in LA for a couple of days, and I've been getting up really early, and because your circadian rhythm has been misadjusted, and that's what happens. That's usually the first or second sign of adrenal fatigue, is when your circadian rhythm starts to get a little bit off. Mm-hmm. You're really awake at night, you're super tired in the morning. It can also look like maybe you're super tired in the morning and then you get this crazy surge of energy around noon, and then, but typically if you want to know what your cortisol levels are doing, you can, without caffeine, measure what your energy levels look like throughout the day. So I usually have patients like put a little plot line, like 0 to 10, and plot, how do you feel at 6 a.m. when you first get up? Are you 7 out of 10? Are you 6 out of 10? And you can get a graph that usually correlates pretty closely with if you were to do salivary cortisol testing. Not always, but usually, and again, that's without caffeine. So if you're drinking caffeine, that's going to artificially change things. Yeah. But that's a good way, kind of a test to see if you want to know how your adrenals are functioning, is to kind of look at what are your energy levels doing throughout the day.
So many of us wake up and we go, I'm pretty tired. I need my cup of coffee.
Yes.
What happens when we drink coffee to the body? So
when you drink coffee, it's not everybody, but for most people who are, if you're slightly sensitive to caffeine, it's gonna artificially induce that fight flight. And here's what happens with fight flight. So you've got this part of your brain called the amygdala, and that's kind of your fear or fight flight sensor. And it's like the basal part of your brain. I like to call it lizard brain. It's either stress or no stress. It's very black and white. There's no in between. So you've got the amygdala, which like detects stress. So if there were a lion were to jump into this recording studio right now, all of our amygdalas would go crazy, and we'd get a flood of hormones that would go to our hypothalamus, and it would say, hypothalamus, pump out cortico-releasing hormone. And then a whole other bunch of cascading hormones will happen, and eventually your adrenals will pump out cortisol and adrenaline, which puts us into fight-flight. And when you're in fight-flight, all your blood flow goes to your arms and your legs, your blood pressure increases, your heart rate increases, your pupils constrict, digestion shuts off, sex hormone production shuts off, so nothing's happening internally, and healing shuts off. So you're just ready to go and fight. So when you drink coffee tends to mimic that. So it kind of puts you into, and especially if you're very sensitive to coffee, that can put you even more into fight flight. So again, and it gives you energy when you're in a fight flight. You're ready to run, so it's not always a bad thing. I think if your cup of coffee in the morning is a ritual, and it's, you wake up, I have a lot of patients that will say that they have kids and they wake up at 5 a.m. to have an hour before their children wake up, and they drink their coffee, which gives them a little bit of energy, but they also are having a little bit of rest time, and it's a ritual. I think that's of benefit.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're like drinking, Bang energy drink or, mainlining caffeine to get through your day, then that's usually a problem. Because I get this question a lot: is coffee good for me or bad for me? I'm like, well, it's kind of how you're using it.
That's exactly what I say. I go, it's exactly the message you're giving your body when you drink the coffee.
Yes, that's
and I
totally
say your
right.
coffee should be your ritual. It shouldn't be your crutch.
Yes.
And so many of Americans were like,
we use it as a crutch.
Whereas we go to Italy, right?
Yeah.
They're enjoying their time out in a cafe.
Yeah.
They're drinking a little coffee. It's just different.
It's very different.
So all right. So let's say we have coffee as a crutch, or cortisol is dysfunction. what other stages to the adrenal, how it's dysfunctional?
Well, so then what typically will happen is if you stay in fight, flight, and you kind of get into that adrenal debt that I was talking about. Yes. So if you're not getting enough sleep, or if you're kind of using caffeine as your crutch and giving you kind of this false energy, your body's production of cortisol level can go down. And so then you don't have as much. And so that means sometimes you might not have as much in the morning, and then maybe you get some in the afternoon. So you can get that dysregulation of the pattern throughout the day. But what will also happen is you can start to see random symptoms starting to happen. So cortisol, like I said at the beginning, it's our body's natural anti-inflammatory. So it's our natural steroid. So if you get, if you hit your knee or you get a bruise, one of the first things the body does is it sends cortisol there to heal it. And that's because when the cortisol gets inside the cells, well, this is a little bit confusing with cortisol, but initially it will upregulate inflammation to help the healing process, and then it should downregulate it. The body has these beautiful checks and balances. It's like, okay, this fight flight, we're going to be in it for a minute, which is going to turn on the inflammation, and that's going to help you heal. But then we're going to have these beautiful checks and balances, and then we're going to turn it off, and you're going to go back into rest. But the problem is we end up all staying stuck in that initial fight flight stage, and that's not good. We can't sustain it. And it doesn't. So eventually what will happen is lots of symptoms will start to go wrong. And in women, sometimes that can look like their menstrual cycle gets disrupted, digestive systems get disrupted, because when you're in fight flight, you can't digest. Mm-hmm. So you can get heartburn, you might have constipation, you might have diarrhea. It can start to affect the thyroid. It can start to affect hair, skin, nails. It can start to cause weight gain around the abdomen. And so a lot of people that come to me, they have all of these symptoms, like my hair's falling out. I'm having trouble going to the bathroom. I'm getting acne. All these little things are popping up, and the body doesn't have the energy to go fix. It doesn't have enough cortisol to go fix all those little things. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, and so that's usually like in stage 2 or stage 3 of adrenal fatigue, the body just starts kind of breaking down. And most people they're coming into my office and they're like, I've seen all my doctors and all my labs look normal. Because typically you're not getting tested. It's hard to test for, unless you're doing a 4-point cortisol test or testing for some of the hormones. Your CBC normally looks fine. Your metabolic panel looks fine. There's nothing seriously wrong with you in a sense that like you're going to die of, which that can happen if you don't address it, with chronic stress. But a lot of people are like, they've just told me it's all in my head and it's stress. And it is stress, but it doesn't mean that it's not real, because people come in and they're like, my doctor just told me to take an antidepressant. I'm just crazy. I need an antidepressant. And nobody wants to hear that. Right? Nobody wants to be like, I'm told I'm crazy, because there is actually something physiologically wrong. Mm-hmm. The body is yelling at them. The body's like, I need rest. I need you to put these lifestyle practices in place so that I can get the rest that I need to build more cortisol to fix your shit. Excuse me for cursing. No, but you know what I mean?
Fundamentals. This is fundamental to healing.
It is.
You cannot take a supplement or a medication and think you're going to heal if you're not
getting the rest. Time. Yeah.
And I call it rituals, because in the rituals you get to stop. The cell phone stops. You have no phone, no distraction. You're just all right, self-reflection, relaxation. Listen to your favorite song. You know what I do sometimes? I put on, like if a new album comes out and it's like really good artists, I put on really nice noise canceling phones, close my eyes, listen to the album. Yeah. I come out like I came out of like a concert. Like I was like in some sort of sensory deprivation concert. It's amazing.
Well, music's a beautiful way to calm the nervous system down. And we've used it for ages, I think. And I like the way that you call it rituals, because just the idea of a ritual, as humans, we've done that for thousands of years. We've done rituals to come together as a community, or to get back in tune with yourself or with a higher power, and it's just a nice way to calm the system down.
Calm the system, exactly. And we can all integrate it. So let's say we're in this fight or flight.
Yes.
Our doctor's saying, look, your blood work looks okay. You just need maybe to do antidepressant or something. What happens after 2 years of this, 3 years of this, and we don't check or balance or relax, nothing?
I mean, if you're to stay in that state, typically what because I will see people that have been like, I've been struggling with this for several years, it tends to kind of go in either one pathway or the other. Some people, they get affected on more physical realms. So, they'll aches and pains, they'll have major digestive issues. I mean, they're the ones that end up going to specialist after specialist trying to figure out what's wrong. And again, there's usually not anything conventional medicine can figure out. In other cases, it can start to turn into really bad anxiety, depression. It can kind of go and make the mental health route really, because, depression and anxiety can be looked at as inflammation of the brain. Yeah. And so if we don't have enough cortisol to get into the cells in the brain, we're going to have unchecked, inflammatory cytokines in the brain tissue, which can then lead to. So, and again, this is often treated with Western medicine. Oh, here's an antidepressant, or here's this drug, or here's this sleeping med, and a lot of times people can end up on polypharmaceutical and just with symptoms being suppressed, and that we're not really addressing the root issue. And I think addressing the root issue and this can be hard for people because sometimes it's not a pill. I mean, supplements and herbs can help, but it's really the putting into practice of these daily lifestyle practices, and which it's not always the easy route, right?
No,
like
because we can do it for a week, but then all of a sudden we go, oh, I really got to get to work today, and I really need to do this project.
Or the other thing that I see is people will say, yeah, I tried meditating. I did it for a week. I didn't notice any difference. Sometimes if it took you 15 years to get where you are, you're not going to see a profound change. I mean, you can, but you might not always see a profound change in how you feel after a week. You've got to give it time.
100%. No, it took me 60 days of meditation to finally feel my nervous system straight.
Yeah.
To feel my nervous system go, okay, yeah.
Now that's so good that you're talking about that, because I think meditation, it's like exercise, right? You're not going to just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to run a marathon without training for the marathon, right? You've got to actually put it into practice. And you might not start to, if you want to become a runner, you might not start to see the effects of exercise in your body until you've been doing it daily for a while. Same thing with meditation. But when you do get there with meditation, how amazing is it?
Yeah.
Right?
It's amazing. You know what it is? In your waking life, when you're outside of meditation, your nervous system hypervigilance goes down.
Yeah.
So then you're like, actually, I usually would be 10 out of 10 for this.
But then you're
like,
only...
why am I a 4 out of 10?
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Well, but what's actually happening is what meditation does, it upregulates those glucocorticoid receptors. So you're actually allowing the cortisol to get into the cell and reduce the inflammation. But you're also, I didn't explain this process. So I talked about the amygdala turning on the fight-flight response. So let's go back to that lion scenario. The lion's in here. We all get freaked out. We deal with the lion. We get it out of the room. Once the stressor's over, the cortisol that's floating around your bloodstream, one of its jobs is to go back to the hypothalamus, and it binds to a similar type receptor. And there's a gene that codes for this called NR3C1. It's in the brain, and the cortisol actually turns off fight-flight. So that's like your off button. But that same thing, that can get downregulated if you're under constant stress. So meditation upregulates the production of the receptor, your off buttons, essentially, if you want it in a colloquial term. Like when you meditate, you are allowing your body to come out of fight flight a lot easier, which is what we all need.
And you notice that. That's the vigilance.
Yes.
You go, whoa, like there's a stressor.
Yes.
I see it.
And it's okay to be stressed. Like our stress system was built, like our bodies were designed beautifully. Like, if a lion, thank God for the fight-flight system if we're being chased by something, but then we don't want that stress to linger. We want it, once we're safe, we want it to go away, and we want to be able to come back and digestion to turn back on and healing to occur again. We don't want to get stuck in that fight-flight. But yeah, so that's why meditation can be so beneficial.
And interesting, you mentioned NR3C1. That's the gene that is implicated with generational trauma.
Yes.
Which is wild.
It definitely is.
Right? Because that's the cortisol dysfunction that we sort of inherit from our parents and their grandparents.
Yeah.
Which is, it's so amazing to think how connected we are to our lineage when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Because, and actually, have you done any research or looked at how in utero a stressful event, something affects the child?
Oh, it's really interesting how that can affect on a lot of different levels. It can affect sex hormones, it can affect stress hormones, it can affect thyroid, it affects the endocrine system in a major way. But I think it also affects, and this is my own personal belief, there's not a lot of research on receptors. There's not a ton of it out there, but I think that my personal view is that in the next 10 to 15 years, that's where medicine needs to start going, is looking at cellular receptors. Because you can have all these chemicals floating around the system, but if the receptors aren't there, if the body's downregulating, we get problems, right? And it's hard to test for receptors because they're on the actual cells and we're drawing blood. So it's hard to see what's going on. But yeah, the research, in utero, when babies under stress, it changes what's going to be expressed in their DNA, right? So they're still going to inherit the same DNA from mom and dad, but what gets turned on and turned off is going to be a little bit different. I can't remember where I read this, but when you go and you look at the DNA strands, and somebody did Dr. Emoto, the Japanese guy who looked at the water crystals? It might have been someone who was looking at research on what he did. But when you look at water and you say it, for you guys listening, if you say love to a glass of water and you look at it molecularly, the crystals are beautiful. If you were to take a different glass of water and say hate, the water looks a mess at a molecular level. But so someone did some research where they were looking at what actually happens to your DNA when you say loving things or when you're in a less stressed state versus when you're saying negative things. And when the DNA is undergoing, let's say, trauma of some, it actually causes the coils to tighten. So it's harder for the body to transcribe or to make the proteins when you're under stress.
Wow.
So, but when you say positive, loving, and it's in a good environment, the DNA just kind of unwinds itself and then it's easy for the body to make whatever proteins it needs to make. So that's like a literal, like when you're under stress, your body can't make the things it needs to make because your DNA is coiling up too tight. And think about when your body's stressed, we hunch over, we feel like this, and our cells are doing that in the same way, which is, I think that's just so cool.
It's fascinating. It's reflecting in parallel.
It is. It's totally reflecting in parallel. But so, it's like those videos where they show the plants, where they speak loving things to the plants and the plants thrive, and then they bully the plants and the plants die. So it just speaks to, again, having like being nice to one another, being love. Like love is ultimately a wonderful medicine. Amen. And is so important when you're under stress as well.
Amen.
And self-love too, I think, because if you're saying negative things to yourself, that's one, you're actually hurting your DNA, and two, negative self-thoughts can trigger your fight-flight response.
Part of my morning ritual is mirror work.
Yeah.
I look and I fell in love with myself years ago. Aside from the Leo, being a Leo walking in, no, it's true like self-love. And there's, as corny as it sounds, there is something to be said when you hug yourself and you breathe out. Like I usually breathe in deeply, hug myself, breathe out. And I'm like, that actually feels really good.
Yeah.
Imagine just doing that every morning, just one hug.
Yeah.
What does that tell your DNA?
Well, it tells your DNA it's going to help. It's going to help your whole day be better. Yeah. And that's going to help calm your nervous system. And how long does that take?
1 second.
1 second. And it's free too, right? That's the other thing that I think is so amazing about, a lot of the things that really need to be done to heal yourself. A lot of them don't cost anything, and you can do them anywhere, right? Learning breathwork techniques, you can do them in your car before you walk into a meeting. You could do them in a meeting. If you're in a really stressed state and you're nervous, you can, there are certain breathwork techniques that you could do that people might not know that you're doing, and it can help calm the nervous system down. I love, for a lot of my patients that have digestive disorders, I'll have them do belly breathing before they eat. Yeah. So you take 5 or 6 deep breaths, bringing oxygen into the abdomen, which turns on digestion, and it helps your body digest food better. It'll help regulate bowels. So it's a really great way to just, again, calm the nervous system down so that the nervous system can do its rest digest thing.
I was shocked and I work with a breathwork coach every month. I was shocked how much my stomach was sucked in.
Yeah. We all suck in and stick our chest out.
We stick our chest out. I'm driving the car and I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And then all of my muscles are holding in my stomach. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, my body.
Yeah, and then you get tension up here and
exactly.
It's not good.
So when we see a fight or flight event, right? Little lion coming in the studio, our cortisol is shooting out, really high levels and other hormones. You said over time, cortisol just starts going down and down and down.
Yeah, because think about it. So your adrenal glands are what produce cortisol. And cortisol, I like to call it a metabolically expensive molecule. It's a steroidal hormone. So it's large, it's got a bunch of rings, and it's a bunch of things on it. It takes a lot of nutrients and it takes a lot of cofactors to build cortisol. So if you're going and going and going and you're constantly in fight flight, the other thing what happens is when you're in fight flight, you're in kind of a catabolic state. You're like using up a lot of your energy, right? So you're going to use up a lot of your magnesium, a lot of your B5, B6, all of the cofactors that it uses to. And if you run out of those, you literally don't have the building blocks to make more cortisol. So the body and what happens a lot of times in women is women's bodies are also making, and sometimes in men too, are making other sex hormones like progesterone and estrogen. And if the body's like, ooh, I'm really stressed, but I don't have enough, what I need to build the cortisol, I'm going to steal from the progesterone over there. And then they start to get low progesterone. And sometimes in men that can happen where they'll start to steal from testosterone, and men can start to get lower testosterone levels, just so the body can keep producing cortisol to deal with the stress. And so, if you're listening and you've got hormonal dysfunction of any kind, usually the root goes back to your body's been shunting over to the cortisol pathway and your hormone levels are dropping. And you can take hormones, you can use herbs, but if you don't address the underlying issue of not having enough cortisol, you're constantly going to be in kind of a deficit.
Yeah, which makes sense, right? Because there's a lot of us, because our body's going, why would we reproduce? You're so stressed. Well,
exactly. It's like, we don't need the progesterone. We don't need to be ovulating. We don't need to be doing this. We don't need testosterone. Let's keep, the body will, when you're in fight-flight mode, the body does everything to stay in fight-flight mode because we're in that mode. It's like, we're supposed to be getting safe. And you prioritize keeping yourself safe so that you don't die. But most of us today are not in fight flight because we're being chased by lions. We're usually in fight flight because our boss sent us an email or our child's crying or, whatever, or I'm late for something, so it doesn't really matter what the stressor is. And this is where, in the brain, I was talking about that amygdala, that's like your lizard brain, which is just off and on. There's no in between. But then we have our prefrontal cortex is what allows us to discern. Like I've used this example a lot, like in the past year, obviously, or year and a half. It's been a stressful year, right? And I have some patients that sit down there like, no, COVID's been the best thing that ever happened. I'm so chill. I don't have any stress. But they're sitting in front of me presenting with all these stress symptoms. And I'm like, okay, I know that maybe you're not commuting. Things might be better at home, but I don't care who you are. When you go out into a store and you see people with masks on, your amygdala is like, mask, where's the gas? Yeah. Like that's an immediate fight flight. Now, after time, if, you know, as an adult, our prefrontal cortex will say, no, wearing a mask is good. This is what we're doing now. And it will, but you still get that triggering of the fight flight response. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of an interesting, like we are, and this is where also, I think this is where meditation starts to help is meditation strengthens your prefrontal cortex. Right. So it allows you to be more discerning with you're still going to get the trigger. Like you said, you're still going to see the stress, but it's not going to be as overwhelming of an effect after you've strengthened that muscle.
It just feels different.
It feels different. Yeah.
So a lot of viewers and listeners going, all right, I think I'm super stressed.
Yeah.
Why the heck hasn't my doctor tested for this? Can we test and look at these? First of all, how it's affecting our hormones. Can we test how it looks over time?
Yes.
Like what are some of the tests that people who are listening can ask their doctor?
Yeah. So I typically, I will recommend like for first line screening, I mean, a lot of this is done by symptoms, you know, taking a clinical history. But if you want to ask your doctor for a test that insurance will cover, get a fasting morning cortisol level, just so we can get a snapshot of what your cortisol is doing. Because if your cortisol is really low, you'll be able to tell. If it's really, really high in the morning, we'll be able to get a sense of like what's going on. I also think it's really important to do what I talked about, like charting your energy levels to see what that looks like. I also will check DHEA sulfate, which is kind of a cortisol precursor. Mm-hmm. So that's a good gauge to know like what's going on with your adrenals. And I sometimes will check, and this you can ask your doctor, sometimes they might not, sometimes they'll run it, depends on what kind of doctor you're working with. I check an immune marker called CD57. Mm-hmm. I usually check it when I'm looking for Lyme or other stealth infections, but it's a good gauge. If someone's been in adrenal fatigue for a long time, there's specific white blood cells that will tend to be really low if someone's been under fight flight for a long period of time. So that's another way for me to kind of like backhandedly, and those are tests that insurance will cover. Mm-hmm. If you want to, you know, pay for some more functional tests, there's a test called the Dutch test, which looks at cortisol, its metabolites. It's a really fabulous test for it'll give you a lot of information about what's going on with your adrenals. And for women and or men, it can check sex hormones as well, and will check their breakdown pathways. There's other companies that will do a 4-point saliva cortisol test. Mm-hmm. So you can test when you first wake up, test around 10 a.m., test around 2, test if you want to actually see what does your chart look like, you know, and you don't want to just do your energy labs or energy checks. So that there are lots of options for checking, for looking at cortisol numbers. I find, you know, in a lot of taking a really good history can be beneficial. So, you know, if you're working with a doctor who dismisses this, I mean, my advice is always go find a doctor who's going to address this for you. Yeah. You know, I have a podcast too, and I every episode I'm like, find somebody that you can work with that's going to listen to you and that's going to be like, walk you through this journey. Because if you don't have that type of practitioner, it's really hard to navigate all the stuff that's going on. Yeah. And if your doctor's not listening to you, why would you keep going to see them?
100%.
You know,
it's unfortunate because so many people reviewing and listening, they go, yeah, my doctor never listens to me. Find a new doctor. There's a lot of really
there are tons of great doctors, and not even, you know, and there are tons of great allopathic doctors that are that are into this now. So you just need to find one that's going to be in your corner. Yeah. And sometimes, you know, it might be your chiropractor, it might be your nutritionist, somebody who is a practitioner who can help walk you through this journey. Mm-hmm. You know, and if you're having trouble finding one, you know, get on Facebook, get on groups, ask, you know, who are other people seeing, or, you know, your show or listening. You know, there's so much information out there to find out, you know, who to see and who to talk to. But again, you shouldn't have to do this alone.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned conventionally what we can do, insurance covering, because a lot of people are like, listen, I can't afford to
now. And there are tests where you can get good information that insurance will cover. Okay. The other thing I didn't mention is a lot of people that are coming to see me, you know, they're really fatigued. And so I'm always I'm looking at adrenal fatigue, but sometimes thyroid can be an issue too. So doing a full thyroid workup, and there's a couple of thyroid numbers. So TSH, T3, T4 are typically the standard ones, but there's a test called T3 uptake, which actually looks at how much T3 is getting into the cells. And if that's low, that's a sign that your cortisol has been dysregulated for a while. And then there's a test called reverse T3. And typically if that's really elevated, that's another sign that your nervous system has been in overdrive for a long time. So those are kind of like some backhanded ways you can see what's going on with your adrenals.
Awesome information. I love that. So, okay, before we wrap up, 3 things.
Yes.
3 things people listening right now can go, all right, I'm pretty damn stressed listening to this podcast. I'm realizing it. And I want to take things into my own hands right now. Yeah. What are 3 important things that we can do right now?
I think important thing number 1 is you need to have a daily give yourself 10 minutes a day of some sort of relaxing practice, whether that's meditation, whether that's breathing, whether that's just putting on your favorite music and listening to it for 10 minutes. And I highly recommend lying down while you do this. When you lay down, the blood pressure goes down, your heart rate goes down. It kind of tells the body that it's safe. And so if you're feeling really stressed, that's the number 1 thing I have my patients do is I call it get horizontal for 10 minutes.
I love it.
And whether you want to meditate or listen to music, or you could even read a book, just no screens. If you want to do it outside, that's even better because spending time in nature is great. Number 2, I would recommend if you don't already do so, get magnesium into your body in some way. Epsom salt baths are a really great way to do that. If you're someone who likes baths, you'll get the added benefit of that could be your relaxing time. You could do an Epsom salt bath for 10 minutes, and you get magnesium and the relaxing time. You can take magnesium orally. You probably done some shows on magnesium.
Oh, I did a show just on magnesium.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So go listen to that. But magnesium is one of the most important cofactors for every metabolic process, for building cortisol, for breaking it down, for building receptors. So that's probably the number 1 nutrient that I recommend for people that are in a chronic stress state. It also helps relax muscles. It helps you fall asleep. It's a great thing. And number 3, I think try to put away your screens before bed. If you can get 20, those hours between 10 and midnight are golden hours in terms of rejuvenating your cortisol levels and rejuvenating the body's healing capabilities. So, if you go to bed at 11:30, try to start to go to bed at 11.
I know.
Or if you go to bed at 11, try to start to go to bed at 10:30. Even that half an hour is going to make a really big difference. So those little baby changes are the thing, and they're hard. That's probably the hardest one is to go to bed earlier. But if you can try it, you will really notice a difference.
Biggest difference. And for me, it's like, I get to bed like 11:30, 12 on the regular because my body's like, okay, now you're ready to get. Yeah. But I know if I'm asleep by 10, I'm Superman the next day.
And you feel so good, right?
You feel so good.
If I go to bed by 10, I feel great the next day. If I stay up past 10:30, then it's harder for me to fall asleep.
Crazy.
And then I'm like awake, and then I don't sleep as well. I wake up a lot. And so getting to bed, if you can get to bed by 10, even if you're in bed and reading for a little bit, you will notice a really big difference in just the reactivity of your nervous system.
Amazing, amazing, amazing stuff. I really love this podcast. You're so knowledgeable. This is what we need. We need someone to kick down the door and tell us all about stress and what it does to ourselves. Where can we find you?
So you can find me. I hang out on Instagram a lot. It's at Dr. Kinney. I have a show called The Dr. Kinney Show if you want to go listen to that. And my website is drerinkinney.com.
And you practice in?
I practice in Annapolis, Maryland, but I see patients all over the place. So
all right. So if you are, if it's piquing your interest, you feel like you're stressed, reach out to Dr. Erin Kinney. I'm so always happy to get some of my alma mater here representing and amazing work. I'm so happy to hear what you're doing in this world. You're bringing a lot of light, and thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.